Hi, welcome back to the shop. I had some questions about the last video I did about the Type 1 number 45 plane that I had cleaned up from all the rust and got working again, and I cut this groove with. And somebody asked me to talk about setting it up to work as opposed to just the cleaning of it and everything. So I thought I would do that. But in doing that, I thought I should give you a better description of the plane and its parts. So what I've done is, this is the one that I used, and it's the Type 1. I would call it a Type 1A. And this one, that's all in pieces here, I'd call it a Type 1B. And the biggest difference is that these screws here that hold the fence in place, that is, or the skate, that is slotted as opposed to the solid ones. So I'll go through here and I'll do some close-up shots and things, but I want to see if I can describe to you the parts that I'm going to have to put together in order to set it up to work. I also want to show you that there was a change around 10 years later where they modified the 45, and this is a Type 5. So they had a few little differences, but this is the one that has the major difference in that it gives you an adjustment for advancing the iron or blade in the cut. And you'll see that it's a little touchy on these earlier ones without that. You can also see that the body of it, the main body of it, frame, is fairly simple and fairly lightweight compared to this one here. You have the body and these two rods. One goes all the way through the body, and the other one goes through, but it stops here. It doesn't extend. Over here, you have the depth adjuster, your depth stop that can go up and down, and you can tighten down. You have the nicker with the 3 cutters on it and T above, so you can turn it around and get it out of your way. And you have a similar one on the skate here, and I'll do some close-ups so you can see that better. But basically you can revolve this so you have 3 cutting heads, or you can turn them so that they're up and they're not there at all, in case you don't really need them. You don't really need them if you're actually going with the grain of the wood. The other interesting thing that's important about the skate is that there's a little relief here. And when you have a blade set in there, it will sit against that and clamp it in place. Let me bring you in a little closer so you can see some of these things better, and I'll just go through them. I put this cloth down here so that it's easier for me to know that you can see what I'm pointing at and get a better look of it. So this is your main body frame, the main frame of the 45 of the Type 1, and it has the nicker down here that we talked about that have the 3 cutters right there, and the depth stop. And the depth stop just goes up and down, and it'll prevent the plane from cutting any deeper than you want it to. And you can set that here, whatever distance you set between this point and here, that's how deep a groove you'll cut when you're cutting a groove. Back here, you can see where this rod goes all the way through. Attached to that are 2 things. One is a slitter, and this slitter, you can see, is sharpened at a bevel like a knife point. And you can use that for cutting veneers into strips for inlays, something like that. Or if you want to use it as a scribe, you can define the distance of that cut with the fence on a board, and you can actually use it to scribe a line. And then you have here a second depth stop back here that you would set to the same depth as the one in the front. Now, this is the tote. This is the front knob. Front knob is just held in with a brass barrel bolt over it. And the way you can see here is how the blade goes in. The blade sits in this little piece here, and it is the same width. When it's against this back in here, it can't protrude any further than this part here. See, it's flush with this edge, and you want that. You also want a support on this side of it. But here's the key: is what's going to hold that blade in place is going to be this little piece here, and it looks like a simple barrel, but it's got a bevel on one side. When that feeds in there, that flat bevel goes towards the blade, like that. Now, the other thing is that it's actually tapered. So as it goes in, the hole, as it pushes in and is pulled tight, it applies more pressure against the blade, which prevents it from moving. So you can see if I pop that out, the blade will go up and down. But if I push it in, it holds tight. So what holds this barrel in place and applies pressure to it is this brass wing nut on the back here. And it will, let me feed it on here. Hopefully you can see this. There we go. It's pulling that barrel in, and it's applying a lot of pressure and keeping that from moving. So the blade is sitting on that shoulder there. There's a little wing, and that's what's supporting the blade. If you have a wider blade, you need more support further out. So let's talk about that support further out. And that has to do with this piece. This is the next piece to go on the plane. And it also has a nicker here, the same thing. So that you can either move it around and get rid of it, so it's not going to use, you're not going to use it all, or you'll have two. It's flat on this side and it's beveled on this side. And you see there's a tiny little screw that holds it in place. And that little piece will cut ahead of the blade, so it'll score the wood if you're going cross grain. So this piece will feed on the same way as that other onto these two rods. And here's the interesting part. Let's see if I can get you to see it, but on this is another little shoulder here. And that shoulder goes right underneath the blade, like so. So now the blade is being supported on two sides. It's being supported on this side and this side. So when you put a new blade in and you're setting it up, you want to make sure that this flat piece here, this flat here, is flush with the blade. And so all I'm doing is putting my thumb in there, and I can feel both sides, and that way I know it's not any wider than it. And now I can tighten down one of these. Now I can turn it upside down where I can see it, and I can tighten another. So now the blade is fully supported on both sides, this side and this side, because it's sitting against the shoulder of this. Now, if I bring this in as tight as possible, and I squeeze this in, I won't be able to adjust this blade very easily. So I just put this skate on so that it's a little, not terribly loose, but just loose enough that if I loosen up here, I can still move the blade. Now, here's an interesting part of this, is that because remember I said that the tighter you make this, the more that cam comes in and it puts pressure on the blade. In order to adjust the blade up and down, as we're going to have to do, we're not only going to have to loosen this, but we're going to have to tap it in to get that cam so it can be moved. So what I use is a rawhide mallet made out of rawhide. You can see that it's wrapped around, so it's very soft and it won't damage this. And you open this up a little bit and give it a tap. That sent that cam piece out, which means that now the blade is loose. So now I can move the blade up and down as I need to, and I just want it to project a little bit past this skate. Not a lot, just a little bit, and then I can pull this back in, and that will tighten up the blade again. Now that is not set properly yet because that's just visually. That gives me a starting point. So the next thing is that I want to be able to determine where on the piece of wood I'm going to make that cut. So what I need on it is a fence on this side to control that. Now, the fence has two holes, one above the other. The reason for that is that there are times that you want the fence below your blade so that you can only use maybe a portion of your blade. So with that lower one, the blade, the fence can actually project underneath the blade, and then you can do a rabbet like this. But for what we're doing now is we're just going to use this as a plow. So we're going to set it out this way, and we don't really need it to be low. So what we'll do is we'll move it to the two lower holes, and now you see the fence is sitting up higher than the blade. So we can pull it out a little bit away, and now when we tighten this, it will control how far into the piece of the wood the blade will be. The blade is between these two pieces, remember? So what we'll wind up doing is cutting into the wood somewhere right in there. So you set that part up, but you still haven't set up the depth of the blade, and you haven't we haven't put the slitter and those pieces on. We don't really need those for this function, but I wanted to show you another thing about this plane and the difference between it and the more modern one. This is a Type 1, so this is about 1894. 1885. 1894, they came out with a Type 5. And the Type 5, besides the difference of having this wooden fence here, that part, the biggest and most important thing about it is that it has, see, they have this rosewood fence instead of just the metal one. But the biggest thing is they have this. And what that does is that goes in and out, and it catches, there's a little piece, see how I can show you this, there's a little rod that comes off it right there, and that will catch a little notch on the blades. So if you see a blade that has a little notch like that, you know that what you're talking about is a Stanley 45 blade, and a newer version than the first one. The first ones don't have that notch. Here are the blades, and you see there's no notch on that. And so we've got the blade in place. We've got the skate in and supporting the blade. Now what we have to do is to set the depth of the blade. And here's how I do that. So I've I've set the fence up so that the rods are going through the two lower holes, so it acts like a short fence and it won't ride below the blades. And I've set it off a short distance, and what I can do is, if I was doing a tongue and groove, I could open this up and I could get this a bit more centered there on the board, and then tighten these up. The blade is not in. You can see the blade moves up and down. So I bring the blade, I want to make sure that the blade stays against that shoulder and stays flat when I bring it down. So I'm using 2 fingers to bring it down to the wood, and I'm just pushing in slightly. Not digging it into the wood, but just there. That's all. That's all. So now I can feel that it wants to take a shaving. So again, I'm starting in the forward part of the board, doing my cut, and I'm not pushing very hard. Let it take the shaving that it wants to take. Come back a little further. Come back a little further. This is pine, but now I've worked my way that I'm almost right at this edge here, but it's still a ramp going down. So bring it back a little further. There we go. Now we're basically following the track that's there, still hoping to keep the fence against it. Want to keep it tight against it, because we could loosen up and then go like that, and we don't want that. So keeping these inside there. This is being a little bit of a bother, this pine knot here, but now I can see that my depth stop is at the wood. So you can see there's no more cutting. And there we have our groove. And it would work the same way if you were doing the tongue, and you would do that with this cutter. And that would leave that portion there. And for the depth of it, on this cutter, you see you have a little brass piece here that you can move in and out, and that will determine how deep a tongue you get. It'll stop it right there. So here's a little piece of mahogany, and you can see here is the skate and the main frame and the fence, and the blade is back here, behind here, down here, supported on both sides, here and here. And I have this depth stop, not really set to any real distance, but we can drop it down. So that will stop the cutter from going any deeper than what we want. Now, once I get to the point that that step is all the way down, that'll be the end of it. It won't keep going. I'm going to move over, and I'm going to do a similar groove right in here. And so the way to move it over is basically just to loosen these 2 screws, set it where you want, the distance, pull her back. There we go. Now, setting the depth of the blade is another story. I'm going to set this plane up, loosen it up. There's the blade. You see it's moving up and down. I move it down to the work, Close this up, tighten it. Now I can feel that it's starting to cut. Not applying a lot of pressure, and I'm starting the blade around here, not back here. So I'm trenching out the front part up here. No cuts back here yet. Once I get this fairly trenched out, I can move back a little bit and dig, move back a little bit and dig, and then once I get there, now I've got this trench started almost all the way through. Pull it back, there, run straight through, all the way back, run straight through. Now the reason we don't hear anything is that both of our depth stops have reached the wood, so it's not cutting any deeper. So that gives us control of how deep we want to go. Let's set this one up. This is the one with the wider blade, and let's set it up going across the grain. You can see the two lines that the knickers have actually caused. So you can see going across the grain that knicker really helps. The knicker will cut the cross grain as it goes, and then the blade can cut lower. So this is interesting. You can do a groove like this, and then you could come back and you could take off this part here with a regular plane and have sort of a stepped mortise there. Just another way of playing around with these. You can see the different things that we've done. So let's talk about this more modern one here for a second. Like I say, it has this adjustment here, and the blade sits in that same channel, and fits down in until that little notch is there. Then this can be kind of snug up. They changed another thing here, is that they put a little clip around here that holds the place. So when you back this out, you can actually get relief without having to tap that screw. Then here, we need to support the left side of this blade. So we bring this in, and on these, they no longer have that stop that the older ones have. So it will actually go all the way in if you wanted to only to support a part of it and then come under with a lower fence, but we want to support the whole thing. So I'm setting it up so that the main support is still underneath the blade. I'll show that to you. See, on each side. Now I haven't sharpened this blade, so I don't really know what kind of shape it's in. Let's get this cam out of our way because we don't need it. And let's run our fence in to the, let's do that lower section. Also, these now are thumb screws, so they're easier to deal with. And now the knob is where I wanted to have my hand on the other one. So we're going to drop the fence down to the lower portion. And basically what this cam does is the further down it is, it gives you some support, like a depth stop. But if you're doing a larger molding and you need support further out, you can use that to ride on the piece that you did. Now you see, I can bring this in. I can bring it in under the blade, so that now what we're doing is we're going to be cutting a rebate or a rabbet rather than a groove. Okay, there's our depth stop for the distance down. Here's the rear depth stop, approximately the same. We may have to adjust it. And so now, here's the skate and the main body. So you see the blade is between here and here. So we know that the cut won't be any further in than that. And we have now an adjuster for the depth. So we can just loosen this and we can run this down until we start getting a cut. And each time we do that, it's moving it down. Now we've got a little bit of a cut, so I'm going to tighten this up a little here. My fence is my depth stop is all the way down, so that stopped my cut. So I'm going to loosen this, and this is different on these. I can raise and lower this just by turning this knob here. So I can back it off and make that higher and have more of a micro adjustment on it. And well, I hope you enjoyed some of the things that we did. I know that we predominantly used these for plowing. We did a groove, a dado, a rabbet, but there are more things that it can do. This is the kit that comes with it for the blades, and you can see that they're beading blades, and there are other molding blades that you can get as well. They're different size beads here. On the box is the extra slitter and your tongue and groove. They were very simple earlier, and then later, like in 45s and the 55s, they added more blades and different, more molding blades and things. So I don't want you to think that this is the only thing that these planes will do, but they were the simplest for me to show you basically how to put it together and the little parts of it. But all of that is the basic structure that you would then go on to being able to use the other blades and create moldings and other things that you might want to do. So it's more of an introduction. I hope I haven't disappointed anybody with the fact that I only kind of covered that little bit. But if you have one of these, I suggest you try it and use them. Biggest key to success is to make sure that your blades are sharp. Once your blades are sharp, then you'll be well on your way. I did not sharpen the slitters or the knickers on the other 45 that we did cross grain, and it got a little bit of tear out there. So everything needs to be sharp before you start. But I didn't want to stop to do all that, and I wanted to get the video out. I hope you've enjoyed it anyway, and I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel, and that you'll like this, and let YouTube know you like it. I don't know why, it's not important to them, but I guess it makes me feel better about doing these things. At any rate, Stay safe, stay well, keep planing.